If you're over 50 and above and you own a home, I want you to pause for a moment and think about something very carefully. Think about the place you live in right now, the house where you raised your children, the kitchen table where birthdays were celebrated, the walls that quietly watched decades of your life unfold. You probably worked for years to pay for that house, maybe even decades. Mortgage payments, repairs, property taxes, slowly building something that finally feels secure. And once that mortgage was gone, you probably felt a sense of relief that's hard to describe. Because when the bank no longer owns a piece of your home, it finally feels like something in life is truly yours. But here's a question most homeowners never ask themselves. If someone pulled up the official county property records for your house right now, are you absolutely certain your name is the only one listed as the owner? Most people would say yes without hesitation. After all, you know what you signed. You know when you bought the house. You know the years you spent paying for it. But property ownership in America doesn't live inside your memory. It lives inside government records, documents that can be updated, transferred, and filed with a few signatures and the right paperwork. And here's the part that makes many people uncomfortable once they hear it. The person who changes those records isn't always a stranger. Sometimes it's someone you already trust, a relative offering to help with paperwork, a family member who says they understand real estate better than you do, someone who asks you to sign just a few documents so they can handle something complicated. Most people don't question it because trust feels safer than suspicion. The story you're about to hear begins exactly that way, with a couple who believed their home was completely secure after more than 40 years. They had finished paying it off. They believed nothing could threaten it anymore. And yet one day, they discovered something that shook them to the core. According to the official records, the house they had lived in for decades no longer belonged to them. Before this story ends, you may feel compelled to do something most homeowners never think to do. Look up your own property records and make sure nothing has changed without your knowledge. Because sometimes the most dangerous financial threats don't arrive as strangers knocking on your door. Sometimes they arrive as someone saying very calmly, "Don't worry, I'll take care of the paperwork." For 42 years, Robert and Linda Harper slept in the same bedroom. The same hallway photos greeted their children as they grew up. Birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, everything in their lives seemed rooted in one place. Their home, a house they had finished paying off almost 20 years earlier. No mortgage, no debt, just a quiet piece of security they believed no one could take from them. Until one afternoon, a stranger knocked on the door and said something that sounded impossible. "You need to leave this property." Robert couldn't believe his ears, because the house had been there since 1981. But the man at the door calmly explained something that would unravel their entire life. According to the county records, the house no longer belonged to them. Robert Harper was 72, retired mechanic. Linda was 68, former elementary school teacher. They lived in a modest neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. Their home wasn't flashy, but it was worth almost $300,000. And more importantly, it was paid off. For retirees, that kind of security means everything. No monthly mortgage, no financial pressure, just stability. That's why what happened next shocked their entire family. Their nephew Kyle had always been the smart one. Good with computers, good with paperwork, the kind of younger relative that older family members often rely on. Kyle had recently started talking about real estate investing. He offered to help Robert and Linda with something he said was routine, just updating some property paperwork so your home transfers easily to the kids later. It sounded responsible, practical, helpful. Robert trusted him, and they signed. The paperwork looked official. Several pages, legal language, signatures required in multiple places. Kyle explained it quickly. Just estate planning stuff. They signed. Because when someone you trust says something is routine, you rarely question it. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Property tax records had changed. Ownership had transferred to Kyle. The documents Robert and Linda signed were not estate paperwork. They were a property transfer deed. Their nephew had legally moved the house into his name. And because the signatures were real, the transfer was technically valid. Kyle promised something else. He said he would refinance the property, tap the equity, and invest the proceeds, then take care of them. But once the deed was transferred, everything changed. Calls went unanswered, promises disappeared, and a few months later, another letter arrived. When the loan went unpaid, the lender began foreclosure proceedings. The house Robert and Linda had owned for 4 decades was now tied to someone else's debt, their nephew's debt. They went to a lawyer, hoping the situation could be reversed. But property law can be brutal because they had voluntarily signed the transfer deed. Proving fraud became extremely difficult. The legal process dragged on. Stress consumed their retirement years. For Linda, the hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was the betrayal. Family dinners stopped. Holiday gatherings disappeared. A lifetime of trust collapsed under the weight of one decision. Eventually, the case reached court. Community members rallied around them. Local news covered the story. Under pressure, Calm negotiated a settlement. The house was returned, but the damage to the family was permanent. Property scams don't always come from strangers. Sometimes they come from people who already have your trust. That's why lawyers recommend 3 simple rules. Never sign property documents without independent legal review. Always verify what type of document you are signing. And never allow family members to handle property transfers on their own. Trust is not a substitute for verification. Robert and Linda kept their house, but they lost something else that day: their peace of mind. And the painful truth they now share with everyone who will listen is this: the most dangerous scams don't start with strangers. They start with someone saying, "Don't worry, just sign here." If this story surprised you, share it with someone you love, because the next person who needs to hear this warning might be sitting at your own family table. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button so you don't miss the next story.